she'd actually finished. Okay. Lewis Wall, sorry.
Koe te māngai o te whare. Thank you very much to contribute to this first reading debate of the Electoral Amendment Bill. I am now a member of the Justice and Electoral Select Committee, but I wasn't a member of the committee whose terms of reference post the 2014 election was to, and I quote, to examine the law and administrative procedures for the conduct of parliamentary elections in light of the 2014 general election. So the Select Committee received 211 submissions and heard from 32 submitters. And I think critical to any analysis actually should be what the Electoral Commission recommended in terms of their election report. And they really highlighted two critical priorities. The first was promoting voter participation. And that's within the context of a turnout in 2014 of 72.1%, which actually built on the 2011 turnout of 69.6%. And I think that really was a shock for the Electoral Committee, actually voter turnout under 70%, and that continues to be one of the priorities that they've highlighted. And they also highlighted finding ways to meet the changing needs and expectations of voters. And so another critical finding from the Electoral Commission was that the number of people who voted early in 2014 was 29.3%, but in 2011 it was 14.7%. So in fact we had a doubling of the number of people who chose to vote early. And within those two areas, I think what the Select Committee has tried to do was to not only use the submissions from the people who came to our inquiry, but they've also tried to complement and implement the Electoral Commission's findings and recommendations. And that really comes from their mandate, which is outlined in the Electoral Act 4C, and A, which is to facilitate participation in parliamentary democracy. And I actually think that should be at the forefront of our minds as a Select Committee when we debate the merits of this piece of legislation and any proposed amendments. So from my perspective, and I think the perspective of a number of us who have contributed today, we are fully aware of the declining voter participation rates. And we do want to do something about changing those statistics. But one of the other interesting statistics that I want to read into the Hansard today is we also have a problem about enrolment. So in 2005, 94% of eligible voters were enrolled, but in 2014 that had dropped to 90.3%. So there's been a steady decline in enrolment figures. So not only do we have declining enrolment, we have up until the 2014 election had declining voter turnout or participation rates. So I think that we do have, and it is incumbent on us to ensure that the next generation of voter actually is fully engaged in the system. So what the Electoral Commission have been able to tell us is that we seem to have particular issues with a couple of cohorts of people. So those who are under 50 and also those who are under 34. I'm not too sure about why those particular age groups, but I'm sure that there will be submissions to the Select Committee that will outline those issues. We've also got issues about Māori on the general roll compared to voter participation rates to non-Māori on the general roll. But the other interesting statistic, and my colleague Adrian Rudaffair will be interested in this, is that Māori on the Māori roll vote less than Māori on the general roll. And we have also quite a few issues in the Pacific and Asian communities generally. So I think that there are a number of challenges ahead of us. And again, I think if we go back to one of the central purposes of our Electoral Act, it is to make sure that all eligible New Zealanders are enrolled in the system and they have their say, because that's fundamental to democracy. That's fundamental to how our system works. Certainly is fundamental to determining who gets to occupy certain roles within this institution. And so I look forward to having some really robust discussions at Select Committee and actually as a committee enhancing what I think is a good piece of legislation. So where we've got to now, we don't disagree with anything that's on the table, but I think many of us have supplementary order papers that probably have already been drafted, given I know how diligent my colleague Jacinda Ardern is, and are ready to go to enhance this piece of legislation. Now, in terms of the decline of voter participation, there were some interesting comments about civics education, and also about whether we should change the age at which young people or young citizens should be able to vote. Obviously, our voting age is 18, and I'm sure we're going to get submissions that say we should allow 16-year-olds to vote. So I was actually really interested in my colleague Chris Hipkins' comments as a Minister of Education, because obviously we would hope that all 16-year-olds are at school, and so they're contained within a system that can actually encourage and ensure that, that they are enrolled and they actually do vote, because possibly we could set up booths at school. And so if the biggest challenge going forward is that young people are not engaging in the system, I think there's some merit to either a supplementary order paper already based on that presumption, or somebody will make a submission to that effect and provide the rationale to us as a committee for us to make a determination that it has merit. So I'm really not going to speak for much longer. We obviously support this piece of legislation, and I look forward to hearing submissions where I commend the bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.